Welcome back to Roundtail Restoration, everybody. My name is Chris. Time to put the bottom of this Triumph TR4 front suspension back together. Let's see if we can do it. Thanks for watching. Let's get it sorted. So as I mentioned, the next step here is to get the bottom of the suspension put together. The potential problems here, not problems, but difficulties here are that there's no weight on the car, right? So there's no, as I mentioned with torquing stuff down, I think, anyway, in my first video, there's obviously no weight here. So you're gonna put the spring in, and we got a spring compressor, and that's easy, that'll take care of that. But the way that the spring compressor is designed is it takes up the space where the shock goes. So as you relieve the tension on the spring to get the spring compressor out of there, the front suspension expands, and at least the Coney shocks that I have are not tall enough in full expansion to be able to be mounted properly. So in some way, shape, or form, and I haven't quite figured it out yet, I've got to be able to compress that spring without the spring compressor to be able to give me just enough to get the shock started. Once I get it started, I'll be able to screw it down, and I'm not worried about it after that. So there's some tricks to figure out yet here, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. So first up, you got the spring pan here. This is the bottom, and if you can see, you've got 4 nuts on there, and essentially that's where the shock is going to bolt up. So it's going to get mounted like this. The spring compressor is going to come up through this center here. This is the bottom bushing, polyurethane bushing for the spring. You remember I put the upper one up there. The bottom one just kind of sits like that. Got a regular coil spring here. These coil springs are not new to the car. They are, but they're new to me, and they seem to be in halfway decent shape, so we're going to use those. I'm just going to put those on there and then get this and tighten it down, and hopefully it's going to compress. The spring compressor, like I mentioned, is not your normal spring compressor. You can't go out to Harbor Freight and buy the ones that are like Jaws and they compress. They're mainly designed for McPherson struts. You got to have something like this. This is very low tech, obviously. It's just a threaded rod with a large plate on the bottom of it and some 3/4 inch nuts. And essentially what I'm going to do is run the spring compressor up and thread it through all of that stuff, run it up through the top here, then bolt on the top and tighten that bolt down, and it's going to draw that whole thing up and compress this spring. So I've used this several times. I used a similar contraption on the Spitfire. It's not pretty, it's not real convenient, but it works, and it's obviously pretty cheap. So the spring compressors, if you buy them, are not. So let's go ahead and get this set up, and I'll show you how this kind of goes together. This part is not too bad. So as I mentioned, we got the spring pan here. Whoop, gonna take the spring, get it up there and kind of get it started. Remember, I was concerned about the bolts when I was putting the bolts that are up here when I was putting the upper bushing in. That's not a concern with the spring. The spring is a small enough circumference that you don't have to worry about that. So we kind of just hold it up there. Go ahead and thread this rod through all the way into the top, from the top of the shock tower. I'll get this kind of started real quick, and then I'll come back and show you how this is bolting up if I can find my 3/4 inch nut. And of course it's way over there. All right, so that's obviously hanging there. Let me show you. So from the bottom up in the shadow there, you just want to make sure that the spring is not going to get messed up on that collar that's up in there that I showed you before in the first video. So up top, you see that the threaded rod comes through, and I got just a rubber pad here, and that's all that is really to protect the paint, and then a washer so the bolt doesn't bear directly on the shock tower. And then the threaded rod obviously comes up, and we're just going to tighten that down, and that's going to cause the rod to move up and then draw that spring tight. Now you just want to make sure that the spring is kind of seated in here. You can see I got a little bit of play before I get it seated. I want it seated on that upper bushing. So we'll go ahead, play with it real quick and get it under a little bit of tension, and then we'll tighten her up. So I have the spring pan tightening sequence here tightened up and under tension. So we're just going to go ahead and tighten this bolt all the way up, and you'll see this thing come up. And all I'm doing here, the goal is to get the lower wishbones on. So you got to get this, obviously the wishbones are not going to come and drag down that far. So you got to kind of get the spring up and out of the way. And the metal rod, the threaded rod might tend to turn on you, and then you just have to, sometimes it catches, sometimes it doesn't, and this time it's not. So I got it under tension now, and sometimes you gotta get a wrench on that bottom bolt until it kind of cinches up a little bit more. So all we're gonna do is tighten this up. The end goal here is to get and make room for the lower wishbones, which also bolt into this spring pan. That's what the holes are in there for, which you probably can't see, but I'll point them out. So we just got to get the spring compressed and kind of up and out of the way so that I can put the lower wishbones on. So we're just going to go ahead, tighten this thing up. So you got one lower wishbone here. You can see there's a stud. That stud goes down, and the trunnion is going to move in. Or excuse me, the wishbone is going to move in because the trunnion is going to bolt up here on this bush, that copper bush that we had to ream out. So essentially, all I'm doing now is just kind of getting set up here and making sure that everything looks good. I'm going to get a little bit of the super lube, put it on the metal portions here, and we'll go ahead and get this guy going. And I fully expect to have to use a rubber mallet here to kind of get these started. Pain in the rear sometimes. So we mostly got that one started. Now, obviously, you bring the other one in, you put that on, and now you're not going to be able to get the trunnion in there. So this all, like I had mentioned, this is all kind of a ballet here to get everything together. So the trunnion here and the trunnions are handed. Like I think I had mentioned in the first video, if you hold it straight, you can see it's at an angle. It's about a 3-degree angle. The trunnions also have like a sandwich of rubber seals and thrust washers. So this is one of the thrust washers, and if you can see it, it's got cutouts in it. So when you grease the bushings here from the grease fittings that I have not put in yet, the grease is going to flow into the bearing. It's going to flow through the cavities in the bearing and eventually flow into all this stuff and be able to all ooze out and everything like that. Because when you put it up next to the trunnion, you can see that it's not flush. So the grease is going to pretty much go everywhere. So what I have found, you got little rubber seals on here. There's like collars on the trunnion and on the lower wishbone. I found it easier to put the thrust washer, if I can get it, inside that rubber seal to help stretch that out. And kind of try to just get it in there. Like putting a rubber band around it, and that way it sticks. And then if you can see that little cutout here, that little machine down portion, that's where that rubber seal is going to stick. So again, we'll lubricate this up a little bit. So we got this lubricated up a little bit just on the sealing or on the bearing part, and we'll just go ahead and put that guy in. And because I ream these, they should just go pretty smoothly in. All right, like so. Now we'll come in from the other side. We'll put the, go ahead and get another thrust washer and piece of rubber. Go ahead and get that on the trunnion and get it up onto the collar portion. Got that, and we'll grab the other lower wishbone. Again, with the stud, goes to the back so that the wishbone tends to move in. And this is where it's going to get a little tricky too, because now I've got two portions to worry about putting together. So let me adjust the camera angle here so you can see this a little bit better. All right, you can see this a little bit. That's the hole in the back here. That's where that stud is going to go. So we're going to go ahead and hopefully get this started while also engaging the trunnion. So got that kind of sitting there a little bit. Get the rubber mallet. Get that going. So that looks to be pretty good. My spring is off here, so now what we're going to have to do is kind of manhandle this, and this is where it gets fun. I'm going to have to kind of manhandle that plate into the bottom of the spring pan. So again, remember you got the seals in there, the thrust washers in there, don't forget that. The trunnion should be relatively nice and smooth to rotate in here, and it feels good. So we'll go ahead, like I said, and kind of manhandle this thing, and you just kind of try to get it started. Obviously there's bolts here that go through. I'll grab those and that'll hopefully help me start this process a little bit easier. I think these bolts are 3 inches or so, 2 3/4, something like that. Again, all this stuff will be in the description. The bump stop goes here. I'll show you that when I get to that point. So you can see that the spring in the back here, you kind of have to move that way. You got to go in a little bit and it's fighting me. So I'm going to compress this spring a little bit more and see if I can't get that fitting a little better. Again, this is all, it's a pain in the ass, frankly, but. So we got that one through. The back one's still fighting me a little bit. So I'll get these started, but not, I'm not going to commit to anything here. All right, so I got that front one just fell in for me. See if I can get the middle one started. All right, middle one started over there. Again, don't forget your flat washer, and these are nylock nuts under here, and these do get torqued, of course. And we're going to go ahead now and, well, actually, I'll put the, all right, the bump stop might not fit. Might not, no, it's not going to sneak up into there. But the bump stop goes in this middle one here, and that's the cavity for the bump stop. So we'll wait on that until we decompress the spring a little bit. So these are 9/16 bolts. And all we're going to do now is kind of get them started. And what I want to do is compress the spring pan a little bit so that I can get those studs in there. So again, it's a little bit of a coordination here. The studs aren't lining up right now perfectly with the holes. So when I kind of get it close, I'm going to move this spring pan around to help get it seated so I don't mess up my threads. Try a little trick here. So I got the clamp on here. What we're going to do is take on the push on the threaded shaft and then tighten on the clamp. There we go. That at least gets that bolt started. So we'll get the washer in there and the nylock nut. All right, but don't want to go too far on that. So that trick worked. So we'll see if we can do the same thing over here in case you didn't get a good shot of it. Again, we're going to squeeze this down a little bit. Here's the sounded like we got it there. All right, there we go. Got that. Get this thing started. So I'm going to go around, cinch all these up. Not going to bore you with that, and then come back to those tight but not torqued. So we got that in there. Again, the trunnion still operates freely. Kind of concerned about that. The other side of the trunnion gets the same thing. You got another thrust washer with that rubber seal. Put that on there. If I can do it without messing it up. And then you have a kind of an interesting stepped flat washer. And yeah, it's a little rusty, but that's all right. So I didn't point it out, but the edge of the trunnion here is knurled with little, those little grooves in it, and this will become knurled as I tighten it down, but I'm not willing to do that quite yet. I believe there is a spec in here, so we're just going to get stuff started on both sides so I don't lose anything, but I'm not ready to tighten this down yet. So we got these tightened, or we got these in there. The next up thing we're going to do is we're going to tighten up and show you how the back of the wishbones here get installed. So for the back of the wishbone, you got this guy, and it's a stepped flange, I guess, for lack of a better way to put it. So that's going to fit on like that. Then you got two little bolts. The bolts come in from the back, not from the front. So that's, you gotta, at least that's how the workshop manual shows it. And then you got a flat washer and a lock washer. Goes as so. And then a big old, there is no other washer, big old nylock nut here. Again, I'm not going to tighten these down. Same thing on the other side, and then we'll come back and see what we're going to do about loosening this up and getting the spring on there and the shock on there and all that other stuff. You may see here that the bottom wishbones are a lot more vertical. The problem is that these back bolts, which is probably being blocked here by this shop, but these back bolts here are very difficult to get to because of the interference from the frame. and it's really close. So unless you get this pretty near vertical, or horizontal, I should say, you can't really get a socket in there and a torque wrench without using crow's feet, and I hate crow's feet because they tend to strip bolts out. So on this side, we've got a torque wrench here with a stubby extension, and this fits. These get torqued to 26 to 28 foot-pounds. So we're gonna go ahead and do this. You got this hole cut out here, which makes it convenient because the head of the torque wrench kind of fits in there. All right, so we got that one. This one over here, I do not have a hole, so we're gonna have to use a longer extension and go get one of those. All right, got that. So now we'll go ahead and torque up the two fronts and the middle on this side. And then I'm not too sure what I'm going to do with the rubber stopper here. I don't know how I'm going to grab that to torque it, but I'll torque all this stuff up and then we'll come back. I had mentioned that I purchased the uprated stub axle kit that you can pick up. There's several people that have them, and because I'm on supporting the Roadster factory, that's where I picked it up. These are not cheap. Not cheap at all. You're looking at almost $500 here for both sides, but you get the stub axle itself, which is, just looking at it, you can see it doesn't taper as quickly, and it's beefier at the end, on both ends really, so it's definitely thicker. Then you've got a portion that goes on like this and kind of prevents the flexing, provides added strength here. You've got nylock nut for the front, or actually castle nut for the front, nylock on the back, and it comes with the D washer and also grade 8 washer for the backs. The deal with this is what I had originally thought was that these would break, and that's not the problem here with these. The problem is that they're relatively weak, and what happens is under extreme cornering, not extreme maybe, but under cornering and something like that, if you're driving spiritedly, these will tend to flex. And as they flex, they interact with the brake caliper and push the pad away from the disc, the front disc, because that flexes as you go, and it pushes the pad open or pushes the caliper open, and the pads come further away. So then when you go to press on the brakes, there's no brakes, and that's obviously not good. There was other British companies that had similar problems. MG and Austin Healey, I think, had the same similar design, and they actually ended up uprating, but Triumph never really fixed it. So these kits do so. The problem is I got to get this stub axle out. Supposedly what it says to do is a sharp ting here on the back. So it does come with instructions. It tells you how to use everything. There's shims in here too. So I'm not worried about that, but I do have to get the stub axle out. So we're going to go over to the workbench. I got the one that I've already cleaned up and painted. I wish I had kind of done this before that in case I mar this all up. As I mentioned, back over the workbench, I got the nylock nut on the stub axle screwed down most of the way. The stub axle itself is just under flush with this, and I just have it sitting in the vise, and it's essentially resting on where you would bolt up the caliper transition piece. So there should be enough overhang here that I'm not worried about bending that or anything. But again, supposedly you should be able to give this a couple good wraps and it should pop out. So I got a 3-pound sledge here. Let's see what happens. Nothing happens. Tighten this down a little bit more so that the top of the stub axle is flush with the nut, so I'm smacking on the stub axle as well. There we go. That got it. All right, so yeah, it's pretty gunked up in there, but that's loose, so that's beautiful. So we'll go ahead and take that nut out if I can. It feels like I might have pancaked those threads a little bit. So there you go. That's what that stub axle looks like. So let's bring it over to the other ones, and now that I've actually got it here, I'll make a direct comparison. Back over the workbench. This is the stub axle I just removed. This is the new one, and you can see that it's quite a bit beefier. The diameter is the same, but there's more of the longer diameter on this than there is on the smaller one. And again, with that sleeve, I think it's going to provide some added strength, and it obviously must work because they wouldn't be selling them as much as they have for as long as they have. So we'll go ahead and get this one knocked out too, and then we'll set that aside for future use. So next up, it's just a simple matter of essentially putting that in, and it's already bottomed out, so that's good. And you got a washer and the big old nylock nut. Now the front of this here, it gets shimmed, so that's not it's not something I can do now because it goes with the hub and all that kind of stuff, and essentially provides, so you've got zero play in it, but while allowing free rotation. So one, I'm probably gonna have to study that a little bit to make sure I understand it, and two, it's, you know, I can't do it now anyway. So we're just gonna go ahead and get this tightened on. This is 60 foot-pounds, I think, 75 foot-pounds, something like that. This is pretty big. It doesn't, this is bigger than the stock one, obviously, so it doesn't really tell you what the torque is. So I might have to reach out to the Roadster Factory or my favorite forum, see if I can figure that out somewhere. But we're gonna go ahead and put that on, or the nylock nut in the washer. And we'll have to go over to the workbench, get this tightened up. This is gonna take a little bit of oomph. So we're gonna leave that at that. And there you go, there's a nice thick new stub axle. And the rest of it will be as I get closer to actually getting the hub on. Spring is still under tension here. I did go ahead and torque down the upper ball joint. I hadn't done that in my last video. I could not find a workshop manual spec for that, but they are the same size bolts as these lower Wishbone bolts, so I torqued them to 27 foot-pounds as well. Next up, what we're gonna do is we're gonna screw the vertical link into the trunnion and mount it to the Wishbone. Not real tight, but at least we'll get it in there. I already showed you how I did the stub axles and they're installed. I don't have this bolt torqued yet, but I will once I get this kind of set in here. There is a seal on this. It's just a rubber seal to keep the oil in. So it is only go in one way. The top of the trunnion is tapered, and the oil seal kind of goes on for that taper. It just doesn't fit the other way. The trunnions, some people think it's filled with grease. It is not. It's filled with oil. I'm not going to do that now. I guess I could, but I don't want to make a mess. I have no idea if I'm going to take this apart and put it back together again. I just don't want to deal with the oil part of it for now. So I'm going to go ahead and just screw it in with it dry. Pretty much goes all the way in. Eventually you're going to start to crush that rubber seal. And once that starts to compress a little bit, we go again. Obviously it needs to point in the right direction. So right about now I'm starting to crush it. And if you don't want to go too far, but you want to get it partially crushed. So I could go around again, but now I'm really jamming that rubber seal on there and that'll leak. So I'm afraid if I go too far out, I've got some play in that and it just doesn't, that seal moves around. So the sweet spot seems to be right there. So now that's in, that's fine. We'll push that back up. And we find the upper ball joint up here. And we kind of get this guy started. Now that upper seals here are pretty stiff. There we go. This has got a nice, got a nice heavy washer here and a big old nylock nut. So we're going to go ahead and tighten that down, and I expect that the ball joint is going to start to spin. And I frankly have never really been able to figure out a good way to not let that happen. So you can put these in temporarily until everything kind of gets tight. But we're just going to tighten it down until that happens. Who knows, maybe it won't. Well, it feels like it's grabbing it actually. All right, again, make sure that that's got halfway decent play there. Again, so the ball joint's temporarily installed. That's not the final take there on that guy. Don't let me fool you. So now I want to loosen the tension on this spring here, and hopefully this will keep the vertical link will keep it together enough that I'll be able to pass the shock through. I'm not sure that that's going to be the case. I have a feeling it's not. All right, so I cheated. I put the piece of wood in here, and that's keeping this semi-compressed. I have no idea how I'm going to release the tension on that. That's going to be a future me problem, but I should be able to get the shock in now. As I explained how this all went together, we'll just take those top bolts off and the top bushing. Set that aside. In the bottom of the shock or the spring pan here, we got the bolts, got to get them out of the way. So if you remember, you had to get this shock all adjusted. So if you did that correctly, it should slide right in here. It got nice Coney stickers on there. They're going to be facing out. The shock up through the hole in the top. So if you did that work properly, this should come right through for you. Might have to finagle it a little bit. There we go. Up at the top here, we'll put that guy on, the bushings. And we're just going to kind of hand tighten them. I'm not going to really get too crazy with those. Next up, what I'm going to do here is torque the bolt on the back of the stub axle, because I got a good spot here. I can get some torque on it. I'm actually going to go this way, the other way with it, so I can push down on it, since I'll probably lift the frame otherwise. Since this is quite a bit beefier, the workshop manual calls out 55 to 60 foot-pounds for this. Since this is quite a bit beefier, I assume it can handle more torque. But the instructions that came with it, that I don't see a torque on there. So I'm going to reach out to the Roadster factory or the manufacturer of the kit. It's a racing company, and just to see if I can get a torque and maybe look on my favorite form. But for now, I'm going to do 60 foot-pounds, and then I'll look that up later. Big old 7/8 inch bolt here. All right, 60 foot-pounds already. That was pretty easy. So that's good. So now I can put the steering lock in there, though I'm not going to worry about getting that fit up properly or anything, just mainly so I don't lose it. I'll worry about all that steering adjustment at a later time. Next up, we're going to get to the bottom here and put in the rebound stop. This here, as I pointed out earlier, is the rebound stop. We're going to bolt up to the frame here, and it's going to come in like this. This is just a rubber stopper, rubber bumper, and that just gets tightened down. Again, orientation from the workshop manual. The bolts come from the inside. They just barely fit in there. And so we'll go ahead and bolt that on. There is a torque spec for these bolts. I think it's like 17 inch-pounds or foot-pounds. I'll take a look again. But we'll come out from underneath here and get this on there. So not really easy to see under here, but before you put that bracket in, you've got the stop itself, I guess you could call it, the non-rubber portion, and this goes underneath the shock, those 4 bolts that we took care of. But you got to make sure that your orientation is right. So essentially it goes like this, not like this. Obviously that's not going to work. So you got to make sure again that you're handed in properly. So this will go in like this, and then we'll be able to get those bolts and lock washers on these guys and get them tightened down as long as it goes on. There you go. Get these tight real quick. No torque spec that I could find for these bolts, but they are the same size as pretty much the rest of them, so I'm going to go to 25 foot-pounds on this, the bottom end of the spec. You got to torque this stuff down now, because obviously if you don't, that's going to be in the way. Another one of those where you gotta make sure that you don't get too far ahead of yourself and have to go back and take stuff off. Again, another reason why I would recommend that you dry run this a couple times, at least once, so that you get a good feel for what you're doing. This may or may not be the 4th time I think I've put this together. So if you look, and you can see some paint chips and stuff like that. So earn my spurs. And sometimes lock washers, even if they're brand new, give up. Brand new lock washer. Just decided to split. Thanks, China. All right, let me get another one of those. Got them all torqued up. Now we'll go ahead and put the actual bump stop in. Again, this is a nut, or excuse me, a lock nut, an eye lock nut, and a flat washer. This is 16 to 18 pounds, so we'll put it at 17. All right, and really, I got lucky because there's probably, let's see if I can show you, total luck. That's 1/16 of an inch in between the bump stop and the bottom. So that piece of wood, that's a highly calibrated piece of wood there that allowed me to do that. I knew exactly what I was doing the whole time. All right, folks, that's all I got. Thanks so much for watching. Leave a comment below. Tell me what you think. Probably a lot of mistakes in there, things I could have done differently or done better. If you know of any, feel free to leave them in the description. I rely on you guys to provide backup for things that I might have missed or to provide experience and recommendations for doing stuff differently. Next up, we're going to get the hub on and kind of work our way out. And then I got to figure out some way to get this piece of wood out of here. We'll see how it goes. Thanks again for watching. Have a good rest of your day. Cheers.